Maryott, and that will be followed by Director O'Neill. No, you're here. You're after Director O'Neill. Yep. I'm keeping track best I can.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a local agency, but I think it's important to remember when we get into sort of big picture conversations like this, which this is about far more than a letter and who signs it. This is, I think, kind of a culmination of some angst that's gone on for a couple of years now. And the letter's kind of a trigger for a little bit of it. I think it's very, very important to remember that this is a local agency with local control and massive, massive power. So we have the ability to take people's land, and we heard that there's residents in San Juan Capistrano that are falling out of escrow. Those are all things that are related. I don't think 200 emails, and I've gotten about the same, should be valued any differently than emails that come from agencies, organizations that may have something at stake monetarily. We have the ability to put debt in the marketplace that has the implied guarantee, at least as far as the market's interpretation of the state of California. I've sold municipal bonds, I've sold debt, and I can tell you that when an agency puts stuff in market, the reason it gets swallowed up so fast by mutual funds is because they know that if the agency fails, the state's going to step in. And if the state fails, the federal government's going to step in. And the last few decades, there's plenty of history that I can document for anybody who'd like to see it. So we have the ability to issue debt at will, pretty much, okay? We have some things that have been discussed. Bro and Bates. Roughly a year ago, I asked why our legislators, who had publicly stated their opposition to the 241, at least the route that was the favored route at the time, were not at the table. Now they may be invited to the table because, frankly, the shit has hit the fan. Pardon the expression, but when you get in the press and when there's accusations of misuse of funds and burning public dollars, it hits the fan, and we end up in dialogues like this. But what's frustrating is we have to wait for that to happen for requests to be viewed in the right context. I have asked as much as a year or more ago why we don't have the right kind of collaboration with OCTA and TCA. And now maybe finally we're getting a working subcommittee. I don't mind the fact that it's a 2-year bill, because it takes 2 years to sort out this agency, which was the first of its kind, empowered by the state legislature, given an enormous scope of power and ability to execute financially, and have it revisited. One of the things I noticed from the Senate hearing, and the Senate bill a year plus ago was I called it a tawdry political stunt, and it was. But you know what? I watched the hearing, and senators asked probing questions. They had some concern as to whether or not the agency had lost a little bit sight of its mission or was being properly managed and guided. And they were very thoughtful inquiries from senators who had no sense of obligation to the assemblyman who filed it. I've told residents in San Juan Capistrano and San Clemente that a lot of very powerful people have called for the abolishment of the TCA. But it's not practical to think the TCA could go away overnight. If there's a long-term strategic evaluation of the TCA, it would have to go on over a 2 or 3 year period. This bill sets a little backdrop of ongoing dialogue about what's working well and what's not working well with both the agency itself and the broader structure of a public-private arrangement that we're a part of, and the first of its kind as far as transportation. With a few of the individual issues, my concern, and the letter's caught up in it because the request is caught up in it, the bill is caught up in it, is the planning component. I've always said when we couldn't get the 241 to the 5, we should have come back to the table and told the OCTA, Regional Planning Agency, hey, we can't get it to the 5. What do you want us to do? What's our next best step for everybody to work right for regional transportation? I don't think a dialogue like that ever took place. That's a problem, and this ongoing quest to use this process, which has gone badly astray on the 241 extension, to use all of that angst and the leverage that it's created as a quest for the 5, and I've been in the meetings, and that's what it is. It sets a real difficult backdrop to getting to any kind of logical end game here as far as better traffic flow to the 241 and peace of mind for the people in my community in San Clemente, which is really where we should be focused at this point. As for lawsuits and discussions around lawsuits, and I think it's really important we flesh some of this out, because Director Bain, after the original letter and the discussion we had about this bill a few weeks ago, Director Bain sent a very, very thoughtful letter documenting some very substantial concerns. As a board member, I don't think there's been any reaction or byproduct of that in terms of the workflow that I've been privy to. So there's unresolved points of concern, okay? And that's just a fact. And this letter feels like it's part of a reactive process that is a little bit more PR driven than good management and government driven. And I do have some concerns with the letter and the continuation of at least a little bit of a tit for tat. I think the last thing, now 2 things. There's a difference between an audit and an evaluation. A cursory audit, or even a little bit more in-depth audit, is not going to get to what I think is really the heart of the matter with regard to the millions we've spent and the circumstances that we sit in now. It's really performance that we're trying to evaluate as it regards the expenditure of funds. That's a different type of audit. That's not an annual audit that blesses the documents. That's a pretty routine deal. Months ago, I asked what our process is for performance evaluation, since we're using all these consultants instead of hiring in-house. That when you hire in-house, they would have a quarterly performance review. They'd have different metrics to perform to. None of us have any sense of that. If anybody can articulate it, what our 5 or 16 million is being and has been spent on, and walk right through it, and who's been effective and why, and how they stand relative to their peers, I'm all ears. But I don't think that's the case, because it's too much money to be spent without a process of ongoing evaluation. So audits and performance evaluations are different. What the speaker said earlier, the resident said about performance and nothing coming back to the board, they're right. We asked for details around the contracts. What's asked of them inside the contracts? What are the subcontracted components? What are the asks of these professionals that we're spending millions of dollars for? Incidentally, we're spending more than the money we're still getting through the gas fund that's going to the maintenance, which is absolutely taxpayer money. So we have a tremendous obligation around the expenditures of those dollars. It would be one thing if we were in a successful place right now, but we're not. We're clearly not in a successful place. We went through a ton. I'm almost done.
Okay,
with all due respect, I'm almost done,
there's
Chair.
other
I will
speakers.
wrap.
Thank
Absolutely,
you.
yes.
If we could stick to 5 minutes, that
Yes,
would be
but
great.
absolutely, we've spent millions of dollars, and we have concluded that the route that was most threatening to the communities, particularly San Clemente, will provide 5% traffic relief on a good day. At some level, there's a lot of failure in there. It's hard to put your finger on because you know who's responsible for what, okay? But at this point, we should be moving forward and beginning to alleviate concerns, not heighten them. And very quickly, as far as lawsuits go, because our community has come within a whisper of joining that lawsuit, but we haven't to date. And I hope we don't, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's not correct that parties to a lawsuit can't have sidebar in a variety of different ways in any normal functioning governmental society. Lawsuits are a fact of life. There's ways to collaborate productively, and I don't think that's any excuse for not having collaborated more productively with San Clemente. And the last thing specifically as regards San Clemente, this town has been asked to endorse something that none of the other 8 or 9 towns have been asked to endure. Those roads have been built skirting along communities.
I'm going to have you stop in 30 seconds. You're going
I knew you
way
were going
too
there,
long.
so
You're grandstanding and
seconds.
kind of politicizing.
We're so
whatever,
in sync. 30 seconds, bingo.
Really?
So,
Okay, good.
so they have skirted the communities. They were laid in place before Eastern Irvine was put together. This is the only community where we started a conversation with, where we're coming pretty much right through your town. So we should recognize, with an agency with massive power, what we set off when we did that. And I think the fact that we're here talking about this today, and we'll be talking about this some more, is a healthy thing. Lastly, I don't think this letter should go. We've never got a good explanation
Your
for the
30
press
seconds
release
is
and
up.
letter.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Hunter
Madam
Trader
Chair. I
William.
appreciate the extension
Yeah,
of time and
a lot
your
of
courtesy.